Okay, so just to give a brief introduction from Cesar, and thank you very much for accepting to present today for us in Child and Development and Education group. And Cesar is an associated researcher at the Institute of Advanced Studies of the University of Campinas, and at the multi-university group of study and research on moral education. He has a PhD in theoretical physics from Munich, and he also has a bachelor degree in classical guitar in Brazil. He specialized in teaching for understanding evaluation for the Howard Graduate School of Education, and the specialization of the implementation of public policy from the Howard Kennedy School. So that's quite an impressive bio, and really interdisciplinary, Cesar. So we are really excited to learn from you. And the title of your presentation is Beauty, Inequality, and Complexity in Education.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to talk to you. This is what I'm going to explain is a program that we've been developing in the last. The group that was mentioned, this group on moral education, it exists for maybe 20 years, but I'm in the group since 7 or 8 years. Previously, I was a physicist, as you heard, and I moved to technology in education and worked there in project-based learning and creating tools and environments and collaborations. But then after I entered this group, my interests and I think my contribution moved to integral education, in the sense that for students to be whole, I believe we need to talk about collaboration, solidarity, democracy, citizenship, and so all these things. And but to put this in education, I think we need also a systemic view, because this is not value. The way that we organize our society is not for this kind of development. So what I'm going to explain is a way to enter in the educational system, thinking as system, and think that it's we need to get to scale. We need to acknowledge that this is complex, and there are beauty in the complexity, and it's necessary to acknowledge this complexity, not try to reduce it. Otherwise, we don't have space for plural words and for diversity. But the way that we built it is increasing inequities, and so this is the reason of the title. And I've been working on this and trying to do it at large scale. It was very nice to know all the work from David Sloan Wilson on this evolutionary path, and this is one way to organize things. It combined with many things that I have been doing. So then it was also a pleasure to be in the group and to have connections to other initiatives. I've been following many seminars from the pro-social, and I believe this is really necessary. So I will share my screen, and since we are just this few people, please feel very comfortable in interrupting and asking questions. Do we need presentations? Brooke, have you been with the group before?
Oh, we could do a presentation. Yes. We before you join, we introduce ourselves, but we could do another presentation. Yes.
I've been a couple of times, but the meeting times I was teaching in an effective needs classroom this past year. So I was unable to kind of make it. It was more sporadic, but now it's summer, so I'm trying to hop on. And I have been in special education for a long time, but I'm just kind of really curious about more of the child and development side, and basically how we can evolve education in a way that makes sense developmentally, especially for our youngest learners. So that's kind of why I'm here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the presentation mode, this is not my computer. Everything is different.
We see your screen, but it's not the presentation mode yet.
Yeah. I lost my mouse. I'll try to do something different. Sorry, I will connect to my own computer, but the camera is not working.
Oh.
Here the mouse is frozen.
Oh, it could be battery, yeah. We'll wait. I think if your presentation is less, we could discuss more at the beginning until you get ready, and then we'll hopefully have some time for questions at the end. Yeah. Even though we are a small group, I wanted to ask at the end of this meeting, if what do you feel? How is the consensus for continuing the bi-weekly meeting during the summer, or take a break? I'm asking that also because I'm volunteering to be a more facilitator, but it's just I'm a volunteer. So if somebody else could volunteer, I will be away 5 weeks, so July and August. So maybe I cannot be the facilitator, but if somebody else wants to step in and get in touch with Anna just before to make sure that we are having a presentation, that would be great. If nobody could commit for that, then we could maybe make a break, take a break till beginning of September, and start at that time.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that I would totally do it, but I have to hop off every day at 10. So yeah, if there's somebody else that is able to, that would be wonderful. But
yes,
take a
thank
break.
you, Anna. Yes, yes.
We wouldn't have Simona and we wouldn't have you for half of the class. I'm fine with starting in September again, personally.
Okay. How about you, bro?
Yeah, I mean, I would be willing to help if you guys have things, or if people are interested in summer things. I definitely, I'm like looking for opportunities to get more involved. So if that would something you guys would need, I would. I think the only week is like the first week in July. I won't be here, but I think after that I should be pretty open.
Okay.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Okay, we don't have to decide now, and we'll ask Cesar after, because we still have one in June that we are all present maybe. So then maybe we could convene one more times in June and decide how we go forward for July and August. Thank you, bro. Yeah. And I think we are the main core. So other people we will recruit, but we always been here for from the beginning. Yes. So we'll see how that travels.
Yeah.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Was I Queen?
such a challenge trying to get the technology to work before one of these programs.
Yeah.
Ugh.
I think, Edith, I have the same problem that you had before. Yeah, my Mac, it's not set up to allow a presentation, so I had hard time too. I have to figure out how to do that.
Well, I had to call in an expensive technician, and he had to go in there, and he said that Macs are notorious for being difficult sometimes to share their screens, and that you have to go in and get that.
Oh, he did it remotely then. Okay.
Well, he actually took my computer and worked on it.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Maybe it wasn't such a complex. I don't know how complicated it was, but it was not something that
he needed some times maybe. Yeah. Yes. That's great that he actually helped you in the end, even though I guess you had to pay for it. Yeah.
All right, it was worth it.
Well, it seems like my husband is pretty good with the technology, but he couldn't help me either. So maybe I have to ask a specialist.
Just a moment, it's opening here, the presentation.
Okay.
So the problem with the other computer is it frozen the mouse, and it was covering everything. I could not move the mouse and could not load things.
Finger crossed it will work now.
Yeah, I'm just opening the presentation here.
Okay.
Starts.
I'm going to put myself on mute because there are frogs in a pond right next to my window, and they're very noisy. So I hope you can't hear them, and I will put myself on mute.
I couldn't hear them, but yes, they could be quite talkative. Yes, for sure. Another thought that I had, and is just to maybe for the next next meeting in 2 weeks, to maybe discuss how do we want to spend time together, and if we want to invite other speakers, and we'll touch on that next week. I guess we'll be not having a presentation, so we'll welcome to idea to brainstorm, and if you want to okay, I will stop here and continue after.
Sorry. I will have no camera, but please interrupt me anytime.
Okay. Great.
Okay. I'll start talking about the natural complexity. When we have a child at home, so our family is a very complex system, because we know that to raise a child, something that you do this moment won't work after 1 year. And if you try to do something with your one child, it's different from others. And we are all the time adapting, because they go to schools, they have new friends, they talk to relatives. And so everything changes the child. and they challenge us, and they say it's unfair because my brother has this and I want also. So it shows that there is no guides for being parents. Even if there exists, we know they are not sufficient. And this idea is very important, because this is the core of our living together. We understand that we need this flexibility and we need to adapt all the time. And we do this very naturally inside the families. But when we go, for instance, to the society, to bigger problems, for instance, in the 60s, when in the United States it was decided they would send a rocket to the moon, it was really complicated, because they had to develop new materials, new math, new science for doing that. But it was depending on resource, and to get resource, the policy had to change. So many things had to be done, new structures, new way of contract things. But the main difference in both raising a child and sending a rocket to the moon is that in one case you have a narrow goal. So you can just say, okay, we reached the moon and we did it in a good way, optimizing resources and getting the structures. But the other case for the child, we don't have a goal, a narrow goal. We could say there is a wide goal that is a family goal, that is, we want to be a family. So being a family is something that is continuous, and well-being, again, is continuous. So we live well together and we have the sense of belonging. And this is something that you cannot put as a narrow goal. You cannot say, now I belong. No, you want to continuously belong to a group or to a family. And this difference is so important, because all this educational system and many parts of the society, they have been reduced to these narrow goals. And we think that if I achieve scores in math, this is an indication of a good education. No, this is necessary, but it's much more than that. And I'm talking about this because I will transit between the necessity that we have to get ordered things and predictable, but also the necessity that we need to be in the other part, that is this wise goals. And when we think about the educational system, we could think, what happens inside the classroom? You have students that come from different families, and each family has their own worldview, their political positioning, their religion. And so when you mix these kids in one classroom, they don't have one identity. We want them to feel as a group, the classroom of second year, right? But it's a mixture. And when we decide this is a group, they have an identity. They have an identity for one thing, but not for many others, because they have this complex mixture of their origins, their families, their developments. That if inside the family they change every day, or every contact they have to different people or to different contents, inside the classroom it's the same. So it's as complex as inside the family, or more, because people have less contacts with each other. So the teacher doesn't know the stories or what happened in last nights for that kids. So this is very important, because we have to prepare students to the words that is the ordered words, the scientific. They are going to be part of this mission oriented goal, even if it is very complicated, but the preparation for the complex is beyond what we usually do. And what happens is that if we take into account that these people, not only students in schools, in classrooms, or in the region, they have these different backgrounds, different groups, different religions. So therefore they are multiple identities, but in each dimension, so economy and politics, and so arts, cultural habits, they are different. So we have many dimensions, and these dimensions are not separated. They are entangled, really, really entangled. And what we usually do, we treat them as independent, as separated. I can develop in this area, then I can do another program for this other area. And let me see if we can. One way to understand this very complex words was created by David Snowden, and he proposed this framework because Kinefin framework, and it's very interesting. And I would simplify it a bit here to explain very rapidly. What he says is that there are situations or problems, moments that we have to take decisions in which it is obvious what we have to do because it was done before, and we can just look at things, sense, and if we put in this category of simple things or obvious things, we could say, oh, we know what we have to do. It's a best practice that we have to impose. So it's kind of rigid. You should not be creative in this kind of things because it's so well known, so working that this is the best way. But when you have situations that are complicated, like sending a rocket to the moon or other things that we do in our society that depends on science, for instance, we know that there are, if you call different specialists to tell you what to do, for instance, in the pandemic after we discovered the vaccine. So it's no more so chaotic or so complex because now we have the vaccine, we have to ponder the economy, if you stay home, if we get vaccinated, first older people, then the other ones. So if we hear different specialists, they would say different things. But in general, you could handle the problem after we have the vaccine. So this is just one example. In this case, if you have different solutions from different specialists, we say there is no one best practice, but you have good practices. Each one works in different ways. Maybe this is better in this kind of an analysis, but the other one is cheaper. And so you can analyze in different things. And we say, in this case, what we need are governing constraints. So people following things that bring order, that bring predictability. If we solve the problem once, you can repeat the steps and do it again. For instance, if you send a rocket to the moon, it's very hard first time, but you describe it and you can do it again in a similar way or better ways. And the other domain here is the domain of the complex. This is the most, in my opinion, important because we have relegated it. We try to, when we think about complexity, usually the approach is it's complex because we don't understand very well, because we don't have the numbers, we don't have the theory, we don't have a good model. Because if you have it, then we can reduce it to the complicated things. Then we solve and it is predictable and we can repeat it. It means that we don't like to stay in the complex domain. We say it's complex only because we don't solve it. If we solve, we reduce complexity, then it's complicated. But what I'm going to defend is that it's very important to be in this domain of complexity, not to try to reduce it, because this is the place where you find, for instance, different people that have different habits, but that surprise you. This is the place where you can be creative, where you can appreciate art, for instance. This is where we realize ourselves as humans. And so this is really, really important not to reduce it. Otherwise, we go to the machines, to mechanisms. That is what happens in the complicated domain. And in this case, what we have, how to navigate complexity, we have sense of direction. We don't have proven solutions or paths. We have to try things. We have to experiment things. This is like raising a child. We do something, and if it doesn't work, you try something different. But you don't kill your child because it's not working. You love it, so you keep doing in different ways. This is necessary in this realm. This is where if we are machines, we are in the complicated domain. If we have mechanisms, then we can try to optimize things, and then we become insensitive. Then we have inequities, increasing inequalities, and the only way to attack or diminish these inequalities is to be in the complex domain and say, okay, we have to share power, we have to share space, we have to understand, to coordinate perspectives. This is what happens in the complex domain. And for doing that, we have enabling constraints, not governing constraints, because if you say, I'm going to govern, I have hierarchy, I have rules, I have decisions that are good for one kind of people or one culture, but it's bad for the others. How to navigate being the best possible for everyone. This is very complex. This is in this domain. And the last domain here is the chaotic domain. It's what happened when the pandemic started, for instance. Never and nothing worked. So no rules, no one knew what to do. Stay home, work from home, or send the kids to schools and spare foods. And so it was chaotic, but just for a moment. Then we developed several things and we leave this domain. But it's sometimes it's being brought to the chaotic is the place where you are forced to be creative, to do things very different, to change the paradigm. So I'm going to say that we live a bit in all of these domains. Our life is a combination of everything. We have situations that are ordered, that so in our complex world, in our society, that we have different cultures living together, where we have necessities. I would say, for me, my reasonable words, the way that I see the words, I would like to be, for instance, to have very few things that are fixed, rigid, and so should be that way every day. I'm saying maybe 10% of the things that we do should follow strict rules. For instance, when we have to get vaccinated, and we know you can do a national campaign and train people and follow the who had vaccine when, first dose, second dose, and so everything. So it's given, and you should not invent over this. But this is a small part. I would say the most part of the time that we spend in doing living situations, I would say they are in the complicated domain. We go to school, we have a routine, but we have different subjects, we have to learn things, we have to apply this knowledge that we are learning in different situations, we have structures that we are part of. And this is good that we have all these expectations and order. This is where the scientists live. I was physicist for many years, and I would say the physics is trying to explain or to improve this domain of the complicated things, where you can calculate things, you can predict things, you can create new things that are going to work the same way next time. Therefore, we have scientific methods, for instance, we can prove things. But I would say sometimes it's nice to be provoked and to enter into the chaotic situation. Sometimes it's not nice, but we are brought there, and this is when we are challenged to be creative. But I would say that the complex domain, I put here maybe 20% or 18% of the time of the situations would be in this realm, because this is where we have arts, where we have that surprises of knowing something, meeting a friend or someone that you never thought that you met someone like this, and you got surprised. This guy was so interesting, and I learned so many things, and so he's so a nice person. It happened to me, for instance, when I moved from Brazil to Germany to do my PhD, and people that were so different, so other culture, and it was so surprising. So experience that brought this wonder and awe, and so beautiful. This happens in art, and so we need this part. And so I'm saying this would be a world that you can live if we have this division of time, if the world is just, if you have democracy, if you have basic needs satisfied, then you can say, okay, to be in the complex domain, because I can, part of my life is ordered. I know what's going to happen. I have a salary. I can buy food for my kids. But what happens in the world, I would say, when you have too much, so the billionaires in the world, this 1%, what are they doing? They are building their own world, the private world. They are saying, for me, everything is obvious. I define it. It's fixed for me because I want it to be this way. And the other parts of the world that is complicated, it's under my domain. So maybe my impression is that this kind of people, they become so insensitive that the complex, for instance, the arts and the surprise is maybe 1%. I'm just shooting numbers, but the idea is this is another word. It's not that word that was just and for everyone is complex and so. But you could go to the other parts, for the bottom 25% in the world, for instance. How are the situations and the time they spent most of their life? I'd say for these people that don't have basic needs guaranteed, nothing is obvious. Nothing works every day. So the part that is complicated and that they have order for things is maybe a small amount of their time and situations. What would happen is that everything is complex in the sense that you cannot predict what is going to happen. But this is not the nice part of complexity. This is the part of complexity in which you don't know, for instance, if you spend 2-3 hours to commute to your work, this would be the time that you have to raise your child. So your life starts becoming a chaos because you don't have interaction with your child. Then they start having problems. You start having psychological problems, motivational problems. So it's a kind of a vicious cycle. And so this is because everything is so unpredictable for you. That's so you are in the complex domain, but not the nice one that I described before. How to create at the same time this virtuous part and being in the complex in as beauty and surprise and art and creativity, but at the same time not neglecting the other parts. I'd say if we have to collaboratively create this space. For instance, if we have this inequity for many people, we have to be responsible to decrease these inequities. And so one way to collaboratively create, and this word is very important. So we don't have enough power to change things unless we do it collaboratively. But it takes a long time, so it must be inserted in evolutionary processes. And the most suitable process that we have to change things is education. But is education not in narrow goals, but in this wide goals? So what I say here, and I show how to do it, is that we have been working in this transformation, paying attention to the scale. It's very important that we don't do it inside the classroom, just one teacher, because we don't have enough power to transform things. We are embedded in culture, so we have to change the culture, and the culture must acknowledge that we navigate complexity in that sense that we don't have, we have to experiment things. We don't have, we are going to have failures, errors. And so if we are solidary to each other, we learn from these tentatives. But otherwise, we punish people. We say, no, you should do this proof of errors. And instead of being safe to fail, you say, no, you are punished to fail. So these are the difference. When we are in the domain of the complicated things, if we have a structure, for instance, the educational system, it's very ordered. We have hierarchies, we have a curriculum, a national curriculum, we have teachers for different disciplines, we have students, we have examinations and routines. Everything is ordered and we can optimize it. But the problem is if we go beyond. So there is a limit in this way that we are ordering things. It's very important that we have this part that can be organized to be organized, but not too much, not over-organized, not over-specialized. And this is the point that I think differentiates the kind of education that we have been doing. So if we want to develop autonomy or to develop solidarity, we cannot do inside the mechanistic system. We cannot do it inside an optimization system. What we have now, for instance, with ChatGPT, for instance, is that it's very suitable for optimization. If you have narrow goals, you can ask questions, you can see what other people did in the internet, in the big data that are there, and then you can learn from there. But you're in these narrow goals. We don't have a possibility to use artificial intelligence for wide goals, like I said before. So how can you improve solidarity, for instance? How can you accept or coordinate in perspectives from different people, different cultures? So many cultures are not in the internet. So you don't have data. When you have big data to create large language models like ChatGPT, you don't have the original people there. So you cannot learn from them. You are reproducing things that are going to be very biased. So this is very, very important. How to go to these large-scale transformations? there are many recent studies and results and science that I think are important to mention. I'm not going to detail, but for instance, it's very important that we get scale. We know that it's very hard to start something that already is large scale. You have to reach large scale. So you need contagious models to get scale. But it's very different to have this contagious effect. If you have, for instance, anger or fear, you just put a fake news and create a narrative, and everyone is so scared that you get a viral effect. But when you want to have change in the cultural habits or complex behavior, the way that you have to structure the connections, the network, and the times and people that connect to different people is very different. So you change yourself if you see someone that you admire or you know doing something different. So you need strong ties to change a complex behavior, but you need also wide range ties, not just one person. So you need to see 2-3 persons doing that's a different or complex behavior for you to be affected. And so it's possible to design networks, to design interactions for this kind of contagious effects for complex behavior, but they are not in the social media that we have now. So it's not useful for that. It's the opposite. It's destroy this kind of complex organization. So you need some synergy that you bring. Other very important point is that this kind of movement, so this collective transformation, it's possible to change the way we evaluate it, the way we use the results of the transformation to promote more transformations. So if you see a few people transformed, you start thinking, oh, maybe I can try that. That was the contagious effect. But when you you do evaluations, not going to the metrics, to the indicators that are very narrow, but you discuss transformations that are more complex. You talk about narratives, for instance. You collect narratives, and the people that make sense of the narratives are the people that are constructing the narratives. That means you can change the evaluation process in such a way that you value much more the people that are doing the transformations, that are feeling the transformation in such a way they say if the transformation is happening or not. Michael Quinn-Patten is one specialist on this, and this last book is on climate transformation for the global problem. But what's behind the way that he describes this kind of evaluation and transformation applies to every social transformation that is large scale. It's very important that we change the role of the people. They are at the same time, they reflect, they evaluate, they change themselves, and they change the environment, the niche. So it would be the same as thinking that the evolutionary process that we have variation, you have selection, and you have propagation. When you say these 3 things are not so different, so maybe what is used to select is also what produce variation. For instance, if you have narratives that are very impacting, we saw this, for instance, when you have fake news that can be different news for different people. You can impact using narratives in such a way that you have people that are very religious, but they are defending arms. And you say, oh, you are a Christian and you are defending violence. So it's incredible that you've bind this kind of things, but you bind this because you create narratives, you create stories that are appealing for these people. So the power of narratives is very important, but you can use in the positive way, not in this negative that I was talking. And this has been introduced in different scales. For instance, this work that I mentioned here from the World Bank is how to do the evaluation of complex programs, so complex initiatives that are at national level, in which you have different programs that combine, different policies that combine to reach results. And what they, this is a 400-page report. It's very interesting. But I'd like to mention that one important thing here is that they say you have to change the way you do evaluation. So metrics are not enough, and you need to have narratives. You have to have people giving sense. So the people that design the program must do adaptive management. The people that are implementing, they must do reflection and evaluation. People that receive the program, they must be reflective and do evaluation. So this is an ecosystem that is very much different from what we usually do. So we, knowing all these things and with the history that we had, our group that is composed by different people from different universities, we create this program that we called Entre Nós. And in Portuguese, this has a double meaning. It's a playing with the words, because entre is among and nós is among ourselves, but nós is also knots, and so tying knots. And because to do this change, you have to take into account all these knots that we have among us. So that was the play with the words here. But the idea is to go to the educational system and put this development for ethical and democratic coexistence as a part, but in a, I would say, expectedly in a clever way, such a way that you don't challenge the system too much, in such a way it is disruptive, but we want to be disruptive. This is the result of, let me see what I'm, okay, I'll go faster. So we have been working on, as I said, 20 years in this, and with different schools, and we do internship in schools and see how they transform and provoke this, working on moral development, well-being, violence, teacher training. So many areas that we have been working. It's a program that we have graduate students in these subjects, and we learn a lot doing this. And then we designed this program that has objectives. I'm going very fast here because I want to discuss the way we do the transformation. And there's these particular things that are inside are important, but I think that maybe I would like to hear you about this way of doing large-scale transformations. So we want to promote this proactive coexistence, not being passive and see what happens, and promoting the quality of the school climate and culture, and decreasing, valuing diversity, decreasing inequalities, and promoting the protagonism and participation of students and care inside. And I think what's important here is also to the continuous improvement of citizenship and democratic values. And we say this, the democratic values are so important that they are transformative. If you say, if you have problems, if you have to take decisions, you should take it horizontally, not ask for help or for someone to intervene and solve the problems or bring with the solution or create a rule. So if you need rules, it should be created by the people discussing themselves. So this is base of ethic discourse, a la Habermas, and so many people defend this. But how to do it is the basis of our approach. We acknowledge that to do this kind of transformation, we have to transform the way people relate to each other. So it is interpersonal way. We have to transform the institution. We need time for reflection, for collective meetings, for decision making that is collective, that is provisory, and you can go later and change things. And so if you create rules, you can discuss the rules and change rules. And you need to advance the knowledge that you have. So it's not common sense. We have a lot of developments in advance in all these things, well-being, and so democratic participation. So people should learn things to apply these things and should live these things after they think of it. So it's very important to have this three interconnected way. And when we say we are going to scale, we are saying we need to go to the educational, cultural, and educational system. And usually it's organized as a Secretary of Education that defines the policy, educational policy and implementation, has the money, and do hire teachers, do define teacher training, make the connection to the universities. So this is, I would say, this is the enabling organization for the education to work. And you have the districts. When you go to large scale, then inside the schools we have different professionals, different public. And when we are talking about this system transformation, you cannot just do a program for students. So students live the way, so the relationships they have, they see what the adults in the school are doing. So if they talk something and do other things, so they say, this is not important, or this is not consistent, because they don't behave the way they want us to behave. So it is very important to be coherent, to be consistent. And so this kind of program should involve all these groups, and is hard. But what we say is that we must, in some way, cascading from the secretary for the policy to the districts and to the schools in a consistent way, in a coherent way, not rigid, but it's very, very important to take into account that this must happen. And what we have designed, this is when we talk to other people, we have been talking to other countries that had national programs for coexistence, and so and other groups in the United States, in Colombia, in Spain, in Chile. And our approach is a bit different. They design a policy and they implement a policy. And what we are trying to do is to create kind of waves in such a way that you prepare all the levels, from the secretary to the students. You prepare them to say, we are going to change the way we communicate. So we are not saying we are change the ethical coexistence, because it's so complex, so many things inside it, that we say, let us do the first transformation that is an enabling transformation. Because if you can change the way you communicate, then you can hear people that you usually not hear. You can give voice for other people. You can take into account the other ideas that are different from yours. So it's not solving many of problems, but it's the first step that is crucial to diminish the polarization that we have in the world, and to diminish the hates that people have now. But we are saying we have to prepare, because when we say go, everyone should try to change the way they communicate. So this is the main idea. We are trying to promote a very collective movement, and then we have to prepare it, because we are saying the Secretary of Education and the problems that you have to solve before saying, before sparking the goal, the trigger to initiate, you have to have enough conditions to say it may work. It's not going to work for everyone. Not everyone is going to change the way they communicate. But if you have enough people, you have that contagious effect that it spreads. But you need some time. You need recursivity, because you start and you see, oh, it's working here, but it's not working here. These people transform this way. For instance, a very authoritative principle. If you can get that this authoritarian principle change a bit and start hearing teachers, for instance, this is a huge transformation for this principle. And we are acknowledging this kind of transformation. You're not saying this is a norm that everyone should transform this way or up to this point. We are saying transform from the level that you have inside your community. You transform individually, you transform as a group, but it must be perceptible, it must be visible, but it must be collective. And this kind of wave that you can create, it depends a lot of things, but it's very powerful. And then you start understanding that if we collectively do things, we can keep doing collective things. So it's so powerful that people that did not, that were resistant, you bring them as a peer pressure, because they are the different now, because everyone now is talking in a different way, is hearing in a different way. So we say that all these themes that I put here, communication or handling conflicts, personal conflict, interpersonal conflicts. So many of the conflicts are natural. And you have these conflicts because you are interacting with other people from different cultures, for instance, or they have different hierarchy or values. It's not that they don't have values. They just put this in a different way that you. And so when you start to understand that you have natural conflicts, that you are living in a world that you have diversity, in you should not make everyone homogeneous. Each of these things you can create a wave to say, let us look collectively to these things and try to change a bit, try to make a transformation. But this transformation is as collective as possible. What do we know? First time you do this, if you try to do something very complicated, for instance, you try to discuss democratic participation. What's behind taking decisions collectively? It's so hard that if you don't do the communication first, the first level of just hearing in an active way and paying attention how you feel, how the other people, you cannot go to that discussion. So we say these are enabling transformations. I will show this in a different way, but the idea is that you can do this in a collective way if you do some preparation. It's not a huge transformation. It doesn't take too much time, but it's very different in a sense from what we do, because we are saying we are going to do something collective. Let us see if we were collective, how collective we were in doing this. It depends on synergies and collaboration and looking at the structures that you have. And how do you do this? For instance, you bring, so you have to advance knowledge. For this module of communication, you must think or read or see a few things and reflect and discuss and analyze your situations using these techniques and knowledge. And I'm not going to spend much time here. But what we say is that in every wave of that, of this kind that we create, you must be sure that it connects to what you do, so it makes sense for you individually, but and you expand your knowledge on it. So that means you may have a personal transformation, individual transformation, but you say we say always you have to promote spaces and conditions for a collective transformation in each of these. So this is a cycle that if you see something of this is not happening, you should stay more time there. It's not a curriculum that you say, okay, we had 2 weeks to learn about communication, nonviolent communication. Okay, let us go to the next step. We are saying, no, you are learning about some thing about communication, but you are applying it, and you are looking at the transformation, collective transformation. If people that are involved say, I don't see a collective transformation, I myself transformed, but my teacher still talks to me in this or that way. So you can understand that this collective transformation, you are not reaching everyone, but if you recursively stay and try different things and discuss why not, so then you have the possibility to get this transformation. And what happens is that maybe in this classroom with this teacher, you cannot transform, but they can see that other teachers and other classrooms transform, or other schools with a different principle are doing transformation. So it's very important that you create this network that make visible who is transforming, in what context, in which conditions. So this is the design of the program to get scale, that you promote these individual transformations, collective transformations, but make it visible for the others. As I said, so for this to happen for the students, you have to create conditions, for instance, for the teachers to talk to each other. But for teachers to talk to each other and say, okay, we give space for the students to transform the way they talk to each other, the way they talk to me and hear or participate in the classroom. For that to happen, you need the teachers, you need the principals, but you need the secretary. But what we ask them is, are you a good example for the others? When you say, look at your way of communicating, could they use the teacher as a model for a good person that hears and consider everyone the same way? So we're saying, to make this transformation, you have to create conditions, but you must be example. And so this example is a cascade. I will show how we do it. And we acknowledge that, as I said before, when you are, for instance, teachers are discussing, okay, this enters in our curriculum, we need some time, we can use this many classes, 2-3 classes in this month from that curriculum. But we have to prepare for that. So this discussion among teachers to create conditions, it takes some time. And what we say is, it is different in different schools. You cannot create something that comes top down and that would work. You have to harmonize with what's happening in that school, and the teachers must agree they are going to experiment this kind of things. Not everyone will be part. You are going to have resistance. And so all this is taken into consideration when we say, try to connect to what do you do, expand your knowledge, and try to do the collective transformation. Maybe the teachers need 4 or 5 meetings to say, we are prepared to be models for our students. We are prepared to use this much time with our students. And so if they don't transform, we can follow. But we know that they are going to analyze ourselves, because so the way we relate to them is a communicative action, and they are going to analyze. So this kind of thing, the preparation for we say, okay, now we have everyone looking at communication. You need some materials, and like here is just one example of tracking what's happening. Are they transforming? If not, why not? What they try? Did they try? And so this is just examples of how to. And one very important practice, when I say it must be visible, you are transforming, and the transformation is visible, but you put lights on it. And the way is to use narratives inside communities of practice. So this is very, very powerful. And we are using the Knowledge Forum. This is a collaborative environment that was developed by Marlene Scardamaglia and Carl Bereiter in the University of Toronto. This is a very powerful tool. Each of these little squares here is some contribution. And the connections is people that commented or augmented the ideas of each other. So this is made to advance knowledge, to build on each other knowledge, to build on narratives, and to ask questions and to get inspired. Each of this, if I double click one of these small boxes, you can hear what people wrote, so the narrative. So this is one example of it written, and it's kind of you can have a different depth in it. You can put a video. I can put, so if I'm talking about one concrete experience, a narrative, I can put examples of what the students said, or I can put the assembly, the record of the assembly. I'm discussing what happened, but I can put it real in this case. And what we see is that it provokes this kind of connections. How did you do this? Because in my school, I have that resistant teachers that don't participate. They try to destroy everything. How are you getting to scale in your school? So this kind of discussions happen in this kind of environment if you promote this kind of participation. We say this community of practice, you need at the beginning a social artist that make connections, that provokes people, that ask questions and say, oh, could you talk more detail? How was your feeling when you were there? And how do you get to scale using this community of practice? Naturally, biologically, we have an evolutionary process in which we were in tribes. So we know people, we have this number that if you have too many people, you lose this contact, this strong contact, strong ties. But you have too little, maybe you don't have enough experience to share. So we've been playing with this kind of community and have an reasonable, I would not say optimal size, but a reasonable size in such a way that you can create this starting relationships, and then they get stronger. And what we try to do is to create this community in such a way that inside the community you have strong ties, but they are not dependent on other people. Because I was talking about democracy. So how do you solve your problems? How do you take decisions in your group, in not necessitating that someone outside? I may need a specialist, for instance, that helps with our problems, but I don't want to create dependency of someone external to our group. So the way to create this, and inside each of these communities, what we do is a cycle that is knowledge advancement and application as a group. I'm not going to show the details here, but that idea that to have this happening in this community of practice where they are reflecting, transforming, discussing, the language of education, of the classroom, of teachers, students is very different from the language from the policy, the accountability, and the defining policies and tracking what's happening. So we have to connect these things. And in this case, that we have these wide goals, not the narrow goals. It would be saying that we are in a realm, in this quadrants here. This is from a specialist in implementing public policy. He says that there are a few policies that you could say they have low conflicts and low ambiguity when you implement. For instance, vaccination. So if you have a reasonable country, people, they would not complain that. So this is something that everyone should have. And so you can say, this is accepted and we know how to do it. So it's very objective, it's no ambiguity, and the way to do is this. So this is possible only for a few kinds of policies. You have other policies that you have, for instance, low ambiguity and high conflict, because, for instance, you are imposing something. So the way that you have to do is given, but people don't agree with that. So you say, I'm an educator, you are telling me that I have to do this kind of examinations that is multiple test based, and I am developing my students for integral, to be integral people, and it is too few. So you have this kind of conflicts depending on the way you define your policy. And then you have also policies in which you have low conflict, but very flexible ways of doing things. And usually this is negative because everyone does what he does, because the policy is not defining things, but then you don't have conflicts. So this is the quadrant that is here. And you have also what's called here the symbolic implementation. This is very important for us, because when we talk that we need people to navigate in the complex realm, we are saying, so the flexibility, the ambiguity, the conflicts, the natural conflicts are there. You should not eliminate conflicts by imposing pressure or making everyone following the strict rules. So you need to make the conflicts be smooth, natural, not but the natural conflicts, because people are different. You should handle them. That means you should have some policies that are flexible in the sense that ambiguity is expected because people are different. You have a mixture of groups with different interests. That means you must be flexible to accommodate these kinds of different powers. But you cannot eliminate totally a conflict, because if you want to learn how to navigate with conflicts, how to live in the plurality of the words, you must have a policy for this, to learn in this this domain. And one of the implementations of public policies that is going in this direction of solving complex problems, but at the same time building state capabilities, because you cannot solve all the problems. This kind of problem that I was describing is something that you are not going to solve. So you're not saying, oh, just eliminate this culture, then you don't have conflicts because you have just one culture. We did this, for instance, with the slavery. You could say you don't have voice, you don't vote, and then so we don't have problems. But after a while, it showed that it's not the way it should go. But we cannot eliminate the problem of having different cultures sharing power, for instance, sharing the space, the same space. So this is natural conflict. And then you are not going to solve it. You are going to navigate this. It's an evolutionary problem, but you need to create capabilities to handle this kind of thing. So this group from the Harvard Kennedy School of Policy, they describe or developed this kind of approach that I'm going to discuss, that is necessary for us to go beyond the idea that you can create a plan and then you implement. So you create an educational reform, you have the common core, then you say, okay, we discuss a bit, talk to some specialists, then you have the curriculum. Now it takes 15 years for us to implement. Train teachers to do new evaluation instruments. So in this 15 years, everything changes in the society. So that reform that you had is not the one that you believe anymore. So this kind of planning and implementing, it works for a few things, but for others not. This paper from Rita and Weber is a classic on showing that if you have complex problems, social messes, this kind of approach doesn't work. So when you have complexity, you should not be strict to your planning. And when you start solving the problem, people change, people interact, the system change. So this is the idea of complex adaptive systems level 1. So you have emergent things that you could not predict at the beginning, but when they start to emerge, you have to react to that. So this kind of things, you need this kind of radical and disruptive downstream problem for collaborative governance. So it is a nice paper from these two researchers. that connects these ideas, and we incorporate this for the top down, because we are saying, so you need a policy that creates conditions for those things, the community of practice that I was describing, that allow for the collective transformation. And the organization of it is to come down in this Kennedy School approach. This is it's called problem-driven iterative adaptation. I show how it works, but the idea is that you can't divide the problems in different problems, but they are still interconnected. So you're not eliminating complexity, but you are creating conditions for going down from the Secretary of Education, so solving or creating conditions for that spark or wave that is collective. So the idea that you could go down is you must solve a lot of problems. You must create conditions, and then you can fire your system from below, and below the approach is this collective intelligence, collective flow, if you want, because when it's virtuals, what happens is that if you are doing something that you believe that is working, you want more of that, you want to go deeper. And so this is the idea of flow, that you go this, if it's too hard, you cannot motivate yourself. But if you can do something that impresses yourself, then you want to do more, then you change, you increase the bar to have more challenging things, then you develop your skills. And so this kind of things, it happens also collectively. And it's very nice to see that when you have some of these enabling transformations that I was talking, in some points, you start having this collective flow. Not at the beginning, because you are not collective yet, but at some points you may fire these kind of things. So this is the approach when you come down using this PDIA. What we did in a few places was trying to use the same collaborative tool to create the narratives, but now you are taking the structure of going in this, creating conditions, solving problems in different groups, different departments, different coordinations. We are doing the same process using that collaborative environment. That means it is registered, it's visible, you can learn from other groups, and you can go, for instance, to one municipality, and the next one builds on what that did. How was the path? How did they get scale? How did they solve problems? How did they harmonize with the national curriculum? All this, if it's registered and visible, you can get a new group that navigates through this. You can double click this, for instance, this fishbone, and you can see how they said, what are the problems, how they solve the problems, how they said, oh, here I have acceptance to tackle this problem. For this other one, I don't have acceptance of the people. I need authorization, I need time. And so this approach is very clever. This is the approach from the Harvard's Kennedy School group, from this building capabilities. But we implemented in this collaborative environment, in this way that you can learn from other groups that start before. That means every new group, they have a reference, they have something visible that was a concrete experience implemented, then they can build on the next one. That means that, in this model that we had communities of practice, we start creating communities of practice that are implementing at this top level, the first and second level of the secretary. And then so we reach this model that you have a language to come down, you have another language that is the educational language to make this transformation and to implement in schools. And this is the way. I'm finishing this, just two slides. Just to remember, when we started, I said you have these 4 quadrants: complicated, obvious, complex, and chaotic. And I said most of the time we are in the complicated. When we design public policy, we design for complicated things mostly. And what we say is that in the complex is where you have people with different worldviews. multiple logics, and you have uncertainties, surprises, and we want people to acknowledge that they can transit from one side to the other. Let me see if I can. Okay. And then we said we could create these waves to get. And what are the waves that we are creating? We are saying we live comfortably in the complicated world where you have predictions, you have order things, and we are saying, let us go to the complex world, but not too much, not lose ourselves in uncertainties. But for instance, if you go for discussing the communications that we have and try to transform the way that we communicate to each other, who are the people that I cannot talk? How can I change my own, as I thought before? What happened is that every time that you go to the complex, you open the Pandora box, it may happen everything. So you are trying to talk to someone that you could not even see the people. Now you are trying to communicate with them. What happens? So, but this is collectively done. So it's unpredictable, but you go just to try to change communication. Then the idea is that you go back to your structure in the schools that you have, discuss what happens. When are you going to discuss? In the time that you have in the schools. You're not changing the structures, but you made a first change. The idea is that when you start doing this, so you are going to the complicated, to the complex, and go back to use the structure that you have. Then you go there and see what happens. This orthogonal edge, going to the complex and improving things, because what happens in the complicated is we always try to optimize things to get to be more efficient. But to be more efficient, usually you increase inequalities. And you are saying they are orthogonal axes. You must go here, but understand what you have here. What happens is that when you do these spirals, you understand that some of the structures that you have in the complicated domain, they must be changed. But we cannot change it before creating the necessity. Therefore, this enabling navigations to the complex, they are enabling for larger change and for collective change. And in each turn in this spiral, we do these incursions in the complexity, and people get the feeling that it's not so bad to go there. We have nice surprises. We find people, we change things that we thought were not possible. So when you change, for instance, participation and have youth participation, you change the school. We know this in many cases, but it's not easy to give voice for the people if only the same youth participate. They have a organized gremium where they are voted, but they are always the same. How can you change value participation, but in such a way that you don't have racism, for instance? So this is, you're not discussing racism, but you're discussing who are participating. Can you improve the number of people, the diversity of people that participate? So you discuss racism later on, but you are preparing this, it's enabling. But when you have this second theme or module about participation, it's a way of points where you can get that collective flow. In the first one, it's very hard to have people just forgetting that they have to work. It takes energy, time. So, but when they start creating things, promote things, make transformations that they decide, this is in the participative part. Let me go to the end of this, and we say that going to this part is what allows us to the development of autonomy of the people, because then you are saying this is a place where you don't have rules, you don't have to follow costumes, habits, you can change things, you can be yourself, but you can be yourself if you pay attention to the others and if you are solidary And so you're developing at the same time solidarity, collaboration, but also the autonomy, and is where we can decrease inequalities, because then you are paying attention to the people. You are not just going to efficiency that is in the other side. And we say that doing this, oops, is what's happening. The result of this, it may take 4 or 5 years, we know, because each wave, when we say we create a wave, we want it to be collective, it may take a lot of time for the first wave. Maybe 3 months in one school, maybe 6 months in other schools, and you have different rhythms. And what the schools do if they see, oh, we are in the second or third wave of transformation, but we have schools that are behind. And we say, this is your responsibility, because you are working as a community. What can you do? Maybe you slow down and you help the others, and then you go collective again. So you're saying, this is a transformation that must be collective. Otherwise, you lose power. You compete again. And you are saying, it's not a competition, it's a transformation to bring you to these other sides. And so the result of this is that you learn to transform. You learn to transform collectively. You can do other transformations that are not in this domain. And so then we can say, so you have a different culture that was created in a very slow movement, in a respectful movement, transforming what was possible in each school to their level. But you have collaboration such a way that this can be really powerful. So I think this was that was the last slide. This is just the theory of transformation. When you say, okay, it's sustainable, it's a continuous advancement, we have evaluation. So it opens all other diagrams that we can use to show it. But this is the theory of transformation that I was explaining all the presentation. Sorry for the long time, but we are proud of the program that we designed, and I wanted to tell you.
Thank you very much. Yes, we could sense that it's something that is dear to your heart. So thank you for sharing. Yes,
you're welcome.
It's marvelous, and to think that it's this far advanced in Brazil. I mean, it's wonderful. So much to teach the rest of us.
Yeah, we have interacted with many groups. For instance, the group from Bob Selman and Catherine Snow in the Harvard Graduate of Schools, they work with this moral development and transformations. And we got ideas, for instance, from Jonathan Cohen from the Columbia University. He's a specialist on school climates. And so it's a work from a few years, and we are now implementing in maybe 2 municipalities. We had the design ready maybe 2 years ago, more or less. We are still producing some of the instruments and the materials, but they are not the key parts. So the design was how to connect things, how to promote these transformations. And then we had the pandemic and could not start. We thought it's not the right point, because things were changed so much, and the necessity of solving urgent problems were so different from what we are doing, that is this creation of the waves, that we thought it's not a good time. And then we had the elections last year, and now we are in the place that to implement. So it's not proven the whole thing, but we did, for instance, the communities of practice. We have been doing many other parts, also the evaluation and many things we have been trying in other in different stages, in different places.
Wow. That's really a great model. It just has to take a lot of schools to participate, how the schools express their interest. Cesar, you present, and if they are ready, they are asking to be part of the program.
Yeah, what we learned is that you should not impose it, but it should be an official program of the secretary. So when you talk to the Secretary of Education and you decide this is going to be official, then they have someone from the Secretary of Education, some professional that is going to follow the program.
Yes.
And then you can harmonize with what's happening in the Secretary, because no one is ingenuous or is naive in this subject anymore. Everyone has a social emotional learning program. Everyone has bought some solution, and you cannot just enter and say, okay, this is a new thing. You must combine, because this is the ethic and democratic part of what we are doing. So you must acknowledge what is working and how you combine to it. So you need people from the secretary that understand what are the programs and how much time and where you have, for instance, possibilities to make that encounters. So who are the people from the secretary that can be the social artists in that communities, because you don't want a dependency. So they must see this is a program, official program, but at the same time, this is a program that is by and for the schools. So it's not a policy. And so to create these conditions is something that we create when we approach the secretary. And to get this participation, you should not impose, but you can say, okay, we have time for it. We have support of the secretary for it. So if they need money or they need the material, it's there for the implementation. But you must conquer the people that participate in that communities. And what happens that if you create the groups of 30 schools, for instance, that are in the community of practice, and you have the principals of that schools in that particular community of practice, if they say, I'm not going to participate, and the other 25 participate, 5 say, I'm not in, but the other 25 are doing things that are working. Then, so what we learned from that studies from Demos Centola, for instance, is that for this kind of transformation, if you have 30% of the people that start doing things and what they do is positive, they see results, then you get the turning point. And so you need 30% more or less, but depends on the quality of the program, for sure. But then you don't need to impose, because you can get 30% of the people. Our group is known here in Brazil. It's considered when we talk and say, this is the group, this is a proposal from GPEN, that is our group of moral education, they would consider. So there's a plus.
That's a plus. That's great. Well, yes, please.
Oh, I just wondered, did you say there were 2 states that had adopted, or 2 regions? I wasn't sure on that.
Yeah, we are starting with 2 municipalities.
Municipalities.
One is they have maybe 60 schools, wow. And the other one in the levels, the grades that we are going to work, they have more or less 600 in São Paulo. It's big. It's not the states, because we have the city of São Paulo and we have the state of São Paulo. So in the city that is which we are working with is the 600 schools. In the state we have almost 5,000 schools.
Wow!
But you're creating a model in the city that might then extend out into the state, perhaps. But
yeah. As I told, the idea was to design something that if you have a different municipality or a state that start participating, they can see what the others did. So they can do, can see, for instance, that fishbone and the harmonization, what were the programs they have before the program, how many people they put to follow, how long does it take, what was the resistance of the people. All these questions, usually one secretary of education, they ask, how do you do this? Should I impose? And so this kind of things, if you show, then they have ideas. They will adapt, we know, but there are concrete things that were done before. Usually they compete. So the system in Brazil is very similar to the system in the United States, where they have these rankings, they have examinations, and they say this is the best school, this is the second one, and then they compete. My state is better than yours, so this is a problem. We have this, but what we are creating is we are saying, okay, keep your scores, keep your competition, but this is another dimension that we are working, and this is for collaboration. This is where you learn from, in this implementation, you learn from each other. So it's a cultural change, but what we hear in Brazil, we had recently, in the last 6 months, many violent attacks, like in the United States. So dead people, and so students with guns, and so it was not common in Brazil. And after the last government and the policy of increasing the number of arms for the people, and the discourse of intolerance, so it became something that is really worrying. And what happened is that the states and the municipalities, they are looking for solutions, and so they approach us, and so we don't have problems on deciding if we have places to start. The only problem is that many of them want urgent solutions that usually are simple solutions for this kind of attacks. So just put cameras and policemen inside schools, things that are really crazy.
It's great though that you give them an alternative, which is a better. It's a broader goal. You want freedom. You want democracy. We should take the slower path, but it's proven that will be a better path. Yeah. Well, it's great. Edith, please.
Would it be correct to say that in a way you've developed a really sophisticated and complicated way, I'm afraid to use that word now, but it's like project-based learning for a school system rather than project-based learning for a classroom of students? Would that be, would that be a fair metaphor?
I'd say more or less. I think the approach for the system is correct, so it's not for the school, but there is a difference in thinking about a project or about a system transformation, because usually a project, you say what I'm going to produce. So you can say that you see concrete things, and then you use the evaluation of the results of projects. You could present it different and design it different and say this is a project in the sense that I'm projecting something and projecting the vision, what I would like. This is similar to what we do. But when we say this is evolutionary, it's like saying education is not a problem that you solve. So like society, you cannot say, I envision this kind of society, then I do a project or implement my policy to reach this society. When I reach there, I say, okay, solved. You cannot do this with society because it's evolutionary. You have everything changing. But education is so connected to society that if you say, I'm going to do an educational reform to reach to this point, and then we are done, I think this is a problem that we should overcome. And when we say this is a continuous transformation, that you learned how to transform collectively, this is the goal, to keep transforming collectively, independent of others, following collective values. And then it's harder to present this as a project because we have so much ideas and a paradigm connect to these projects, the ideal project.
Yeah, I guess I was just using the word very broadly in the sense of it's almost as if you're trying to create like a living organism that has as its guiding principles democracy, creativity, sustainability. But that's a goal. So I shouldn't say project. I should just there's a goal there that you're getting everyone to work towards. But the emphasis on collaboration and learning to work as a team in a good way is something that as a classroom teacher, I know that was what we used to try to do when we were doing a project-based learning project. So I was just trying to fit it into my experience. So I'm sorry.
No, I agree with you. I've been working with project-based learning maybe 20 years, and I think I was very much influenced because when you design projects for integral learning, what do you pay attention is you must acknowledge, you must advance knowledge, you must apply the knowledge, you must develop the skills, the 21st century skills, you must develop social emotional skills, and you must pay attention to the values that move you. So all this stuff are when you work by using projects. And so that was my background. So I believe in this. What happens is that when you go to the educational policy or policy in general, and you say this is a project, they put a stamp. What is the plan? What are the goals? What is the metric? And how can you prove that you are there? And how long is it going to take? And so therefore, I'm trying not to associate to this view, but the project-based learning in education, I love, and I think you're correct.
And Cesar, I think it's so much analogy between the pro-social process, how we have to learn internally to do psychological flexible, how then to work in groups in a really effective way, and then how to influence the society. That's, I think it's amazing how many parallels there are in between the approaches. So that would be great. Yeah, if you could integrate even a little bit of the language of pro-social in this model, not that it's just a suggestion. Yes, but I did see when you were discussing the different stages, I see the analogy of how pro-social wants to do the transformation internally with emotional self-regulation and then psychological flexibility, and then grow from there for sure.
Yeah, when I showed that cycles that we have for local improvements, and then we can identify the groups there as one group that follow the core general principles, the 8 principles. Yes. What I'm saying is that it's useful to think like that for this knowledge building process, for transforming the local transformation and interacting with other groups. But I'm also saying that it's important to say that inside the group or the groups, since they are embedded in other things, they have different connections. So it's not clear where you close your system and where starts the next one. And when you say my group doesn't have just one identity, we have one identity as a group, for instance, for classroom, but and we can define common goals for the group as a classroom. Yes. But when I say we are a classroom, but we have students from different religions that they are competing outside the schools, I'm saying you should take into account this difference inside your group. That means that when you have conflicts, that's a principle that you solve conflicts in a fast way. I would say maybe for this other kind of conflicts, it's important that you acknowledge that you are not able to solve the conflicts. You are living with the conflicts. And so, and then maybe you don't create a sanction, escalating sanction movement for this kind of conflict, because it's not a conflict to be solved. So this kind of complexity, I think, is what we are trying to put. I acknowledge that the core principles are very, very important, but we have other synergies possible when we say, okay, in a very complex and hierarchical network, like an educational system, the culture, maybe if we understand that creating these waves that I thought is, let us transform the way we communicate. So you are putting a syntax and a common goal, but it's very plural, the way people understand it and the way they participate, but you see the result of it. And this would be, we are trying to bring down you are not moved by competition. So I'm not grouping to compete with something different. We are grouping because we are trying to follow some principle, for instance. And what happens usually when we think about the multi-level selection is that you can think about collaborative groups, but then you go to global problems, climate problem, for instance. Then you say, oh, we don't have anyone to compete anymore. But now we must develop a way to collaborate that is not moved by some pressure. It's moved by the way that we ourselves organized as a society. And so you must change your own structure, not fighting against something different. And what we are saying is that it's too high to learn at this point. We should learn to change ourselves and to change ourselves as a community at the first level in the classroom. Therefore, we are trying to put this also there. I would say it's complementary to the approach of the core design principles and the group identities and the understanding that we have rules and we organize ourselves, and this is so important. But there are a few cases that you can understand that things are a bit more complex. And instead of saying, okay, let us go to the complicated, where I can navigate using the core principles, I would say, stay in the complex. It's harder, it takes longer, but it pays.
That was one reason I was so glad you were emphasizing the aesthetic, because there's the personal values that come in and the spiritual considerations for the different faiths that are animating people, and then the idea of the goal being a good way of life, of buen vivir, some that has that space in the complex, right? Not in the verbal complicated, but in the
Yes.
in the complex.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I think if Anna will not be busy, she will also bring the contextual behavior science, that it's part of pro-social. So I think, Cesar, what you were explaining with the complexity is actually context-based, how you work in a pro-social way, collective way, transformative way in your own context, and pro-social embrace that. So Anna will know more about it. Yes. That's great. Yeah, no, I think it's amazing, your work, and I'm happy to that we stay over, and I think it will be a record of 2 hours instead of 1 hour seminar, Cesar. But it was really educative for us. I think I enjoyed it to learn from you for sure, and it's so brand new and systemic. It's how the